Imagine your grandfather built a business from nothing, worked 60-hour weeks, sacrificed holidays, saved every dollar he could. He left behind $500,000 for your family. Your parents inherited it, lived pretty comfortably, maybe upgraded the house, took a few nice trips. And now, you're sitting here watching YouTube videos about money because it's basically gone. And the wild part? Nobody in your family thinks they did anything wrong. Your parents weren't irresponsible people. They weren't gambling addicts or reckless spenders. They just lived. And somehow, living was enough to erase everything your grandfather built. That's what makes this so dangerous. It doesn't feel like a mistake while it's happening. It feels completely normal. And that's exactly why it keeps happening. Generation after generation in families all over the world. My name is Bare Bones Advice, and I spend way too much time thinking about generational wealth and why it keeps slipping through families' hands. If you're someone who wants to be the one who finally breaks the cycle, the one your grandchildren actually talk about, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Here's the thing, this isn't a new problem. There's actually an old saying in multiple cultures around the world. The Chinese say rice paddy to rice paddy in 3 generations. The Brits say clogs to clogs in 3 generations. Here, in America, we say shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves. And I want you to really sit with that for a second. We're not talking about one culture that figured this out. We're talking about societies on completely opposite sides of the planet, with completely different economies, completely different languages, completely different relationships with money, all independently arriving at the exact same conclusion. Every culture on Earth noticed the same thing. Wealth gone. 3 generations. And look, this isn't about bad luck. This is about a very specific, very predictable set of mistakes that families make over and over again without even realizing it. Studies from the Williams Group, a wealth consultancy that surveyed over 3,000 families, found that 70% of wealthy families lose their wealth by the 2nd generation, and by the 3rd, 90%, 9 out of 10 families, gone. Now here's what I find fascinating about that statistic. We tend to think of wealthy families as the ones who have it figured out. Like if you have money, you must know how to keep it. But the data says the complete opposite. Having money and knowing how to sustain money are 2 completely different skill sets. And most families only ever develop one of them. If your grandparents had money, and you don't, you are statistically exactly where most people end up. This isn't your family's personal failure. This is one of the most universal financial patterns in human history. The question is, are you going to keep being a statistic? Or are you going to actually understand what's happening and change it? Let's make this real with actual numbers, because I think this is where it gets really interesting. Say your grandparents built $500,000 in wealth, a business, a property, some savings. Solid. Now they pass. That $500,000 gets divided between, let's say, 3 kids. Now, each parent has roughly $166,000. Okay, still something to work with. But here's what happens next. Lifestyle creep kicks in immediately. That inheritance feels like found money. And psychologically, that matters enormously, which we'll get into in a minute, so it gets spent. Renovations, cars, helping out cousins, a vacation that was deserved. Within 5 years, studies show the average inheritance is fully depleted within 5 years of being received. 5 years. Now those 3 kids each have 2 or 3 children of their own. By the 3rd generation, you've got potentially 8 or 9 grandchildren who were told the family had wealth, but are each holding approximately $0. But wait, let me show you what that $500,000 could have looked like if it had been treated differently. If that $500,000 had been invested in a basic index fund in 1990, nothing fancy, nothing risky, at an average annual return of 10%. By 2025, that money would be worth approximately $8.7 million. $8.7 million. From the same starting point, same family, completely different outcome. The only difference? The decision about what to do with it. The money didn't vanish. It was slowly, quietly, systematically spent by people who never learned how to keep it, let alone grow it. Okay, here's something most financial YouTubers don't bring up, because it's not the most exciting topic, but it is absolutely wrecking generational wealth for middle-class families, especially when wealth gets transferred. The government often takes a cut. Depending on how assets are structured, families can face estate taxes, capital gains taxes on inherited assets that have grown significantly, and probate costs that eat into the total before it even reaches the next generation. Now, the ultra-wealthy, and I'm talking your Rockefellers, your Waltons, they figured out a long time ago how to use trusts, family limited partnerships, and strategic gifting to legally minimize how much of their wealth gets chipped away at transfer. They have lawyers and financial advisors specifically for this purpose. The middle class, they wing it. Someone passes, the family scrambles, and a significant chunk of whatever was built disappears into legal fees and taxes before the kids see a single dollar. Here's what most people don't realize. This is a solvable problem. It just requires planning before the transfer happens, not after. A basic estate plan, a revocable living trust, even just proper beneficiary designations on accounts, these things alone can preserve tens of thousands of dollars that would otherwise be lost. But most families never have the conversation because talking about death and money in the same sentence feels uncomfortable. And that discomfort, that's costing people generational wealth. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so families just spend too much and don't plan properly. Simple fixes, right? Just don't blow the inheritance and set up a trust. But here's what most people don't realize. The spending and the poor planning are just symptoms. The real problem is the wealth was never transferred. Only the money was. Think about that for a second. Your grandparents, who built that $500,000? They spent 30 or 40 years developing the mindset, the habits, the financial discipline, the risk tolerance, and the relationships that created that wealth. That knowledge lived inside their heads, and when they passed, they left behind the money, but took all the wisdom with them. The next generation inherits dollars, but not the decision-making framework that produced those dollars. So they make emotional financial decisions. They avoid investing because it feels risky. They lifestyle inflate because that's what having money is supposed to look like, right? They're not being reckless. They're just operating without a map in territory that requires one. Think of it this way. If I handed you the keys to a Ferrari, but never taught you how to drive, what happens? It's not the car's fault. It's not even your fault. The problem was in the handoff. The asset was transferred, but the operating knowledge wasn't. This is the wealth transfer gap, and almost nobody talks about it. Look. There are two fundamentally different ways families think about money. There's consumption wealth money that exists to be spent and enjoyed right now. And there's productive wealth money that exists to make more money. First-generation builders almost always think in productive wealth. They reinvest. They delay gratification. They see money as a tool, not a reward. They sacrifice present comfort for future security. And it works. That's literally how they built the wealth in the first place. Second-generation receivers almost always shift toward consumption wealth because they never had to build it. They just received it. And receiving money feels completely different psychologically than earning it. This is actually backed by research. Dr. John Collard, who studied family wealth transitions for decades, found that the #1 predictor of whether inherited wealth survives is whether the next generation was involved in building it before receiving it. Not just told about it, actually involved. Working in the family business, sitting in on financial meetings, understanding where the money comes from and what it takes to maintain it. When kids grow up watching money be built, they internalize the builder's mindset. When kids grow up simply experiencing the benefits of money, they internalize the consumer's mindset. And that psychological difference, that invisible internal shift, determines whether your family's wealth makes it to the 4th generation or dies at the 2nd. Here's the other psychological trap that nobody talks about enough. Identity. When families have money, money becomes part of the family's identity, and maintaining the appearance of wealth, even when the actual wealth is declining, becomes more important than preserving the wealth itself. So families keep spending at a level they can no longer sustain, because admitting the money is running out feels like losing who they are. That's not a money problem. That's an ego problem, and it is devastating. Now they pass. Now, this is the part I actually get excited about. Because this pattern is real, but it is not inevitable. There are families that have sustained wealth across multiple generations, and researchers have actually studied what they do differently. The Rothschild family, the Rockefellers. Closer to everyday examples, there are thousands of multi-generational family businesses and wealth holders who have quietly kept it together for 80, 100, 150 years. What do they have in common? They treat the family like a business. They have family governance actual structures, sometimes formal documents, that outline the family's financial values, investment philosophy, and expectations for members who want access to family resources. That might sound extreme, but it works. They also keep the wealth productive. Old money that lasts doesn't sit in savings accounts. It's in assets that generate income, real estate, businesses, investments, so the family is living off returns, not principal. The moment you start spending the principal, you're on a countdown, and critically, they build financial literacy into the culture of the family, not as a lecture, not as a one-time conversation, as an ongoing, multi-generational dialogue about money values and responsibility. Here's what you actually do. Whether you have generational wealth to protect or you're building it from scratch right now, these steps matter more than the amount of money you currently have. First, document the philosophy, just the assets. If you're building wealth, write down why you make the financial decisions you make, your investment thesis, your risk tolerance, your non-negotiables. Your children need your reasoning, not just your results. A bank account balance means nothing without the context of how it was built and what it's for. Second, make money a family conversation, not a family secret. Families that preserve wealth across generations talk about money openly. They discuss investments, losses, budgets, goals. Families that lose wealth treat money as something shameful or private, something you only find out about when someone dies. That secrecy ensures the next generation is financially illiterate at the exact moment they need to be financially sophisticated. Third, structure transfers. Don't just hand them over. Trusts, stage distributions, conditions, financial literacy requirements before access. The families that keep wealth across generations almost always have legal structures that slow down impulsive decisions and reward responsible behavior. A 25-year-old receiving a lump sum inheritance is a very different financial situation than a 25-year-old receiving a structured distribution from a trust managed by a fiduciary. Fourth, involve the next generation before the transfer. Don't wait until you're writing a will. If you have kids, start including them in age-appropriate financial conversations now. Let them see how you budget, invest, and make decisions. The earlier the builder's mindset is planted, the deeper the roots grow. Here's the bottom line. The three-generation curse isn't inevitable. It's a pattern, and patterns can be broken once you understand them. You might be the first generation building from nothing, grinding, saving, investing, trying to create something that outlasts you. Or you might be the second generation, holding something that was handed to you, trying not to be the one who lets it slip. Either way, the move is the same. Stop treating money like something to have and start treating it like something to grow. Stop treating financial knowledge like something embarrassing and start treating it like the most important thing you can pass on. Because here's the real truth. The families that beat this pattern aren't smarter. They're not luckier. They didn't have some magic financial advisor that regular families don't have access to. They just understood one thing clearly. Wealth without wisdom has an expiry date. The clock is already ticking. The question is, what you're going to do about it. Don't let yours expire. I'll see you in the next one.